All right, so hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the State of Salesforce Consulting Partners for Nonprofit and Education. I'm Watt Hamlett with Watt Hamlett Consulting, and thank you all so much for joining today. So on today's webinar, I'm going to be presenting the findings of my annual research into the Salesforce Consulting Partner landscape for nonprofits and education. This is information that's intended to be for a broad variety of stakeholders who have interest in this ecosystem, whose success in some way is dependent on this ecosystem. So whether you're with a nonprofit organization or an education institution, with a consulting business, with a software company, or are a job seeker looking for a home in this ecosystem, I hope you're going to find this information helpful. These are high-level findings, so I won't be diving into specific consulting businesses today, so I won't be naming any names. But if you're interested in going deeper, I do have a couple of offers to share with you at the end. So the way the presentation is structured, I'm going to be answering around 25 questions about the state of the landscape. But I know that you all have questions of your own, so please feel free to use the Q&A panel as we go. I've got about 10 minutes at the end of the session that we can get into your Q&A, and I'll go ahead and answer the first question, which is yes, the session will be recorded, and I'll be sharing that out within a few days after the session. So first, let me tell you a little bit about myself and the work that I do. So I've been focused on technology in the nonprofit sector for over 20 years. And for the past 17 of those, I've been in the Salesforce ecosystem, primarily for nonprofits, but also just to a certain extent for education. And I founded Watt Hamlett Consulting in 2018 with the vision of better buyers and better sellers in the Salesforce ecosystem. So over the past 7 years, I've had the opportunity to work directly with dozens of nonprofits to help them navigate the ecosystem, primarily through needs assessments, partner selections, and implementation oversight. And then I've also consulted to a number of consulting firms and independent consultants and software companies in the space to help them either establish or grow their businesses to better serve nonprofits with Salesforce. I do consider myself a true student of this ecosystem. And the research I'm going to share with you, I do first and foremost for me so that I can be as informed as possible when I'm working with my clients. But I also look for opportunities like this so that I can share it with you all so that you can also have a better understanding and perhaps be more data driven about your own decisions in the ecosystem, whatever they may be. So with that, let's get into our first question. Which consulting businesses provide Salesforce-related services to the nonprofit and education sectors? So I'm not going to tell you the answer to this question in this case, but I'm going to tell you how I answer the question because that affects all of the rest of the information I'm going to share today. So up until about 3 years ago, until the end of 2022, there was a pretty straightforward way to answer this question. You would go to the salesforce.org website. You would go to the partners page, you would click on nonprofit or education, and there would be a list of all of the companies that were part of Salesforce.org's partner program. But where we are today, not only does the Salesforce.org partner program not exist anymore, Salesforce.org doesn't exist anymore. And in fact, if you go to the Salesforce.com pages for nonprofit and education, there is no longer any reference, at least that I could find, to partners at all. So Salesforce has really put it back on us to figure out who these companies are. And so for me, there are two primary sources that I rely on to help me answer this question. And these are the two sources that this presentation is drawn from. And that's the App Exchange and Watts List. So let me tell you a little bit about how I use these sites. And so you'll understand better the information that follows. So as you all probably know, the App Exchange is Salesforce's official directory of all of its consulting partners. In order for a company to be on the App Exchange, they have to be a Salesforce partner, which means they have met certain minimum qualifications and have their application approved by Salesforce. The specifics of those qualifications can vary year from year in terms of becoming a partner and then continuing to be in good standing. I won't go into the details there, but just suffice it to say, this is a primary source of learning about Salesforce consultants. And then Watts List, as you all, I think a lot of you know, this is an online directory that I created back in 2023 to really help fill the gap that was left by the end of the Salesforce.org partner program so that nonprofits could more easily find their best fit consulting partners and so that consulting partners could be more easily found by their best fit clients. In order for a company to be on Watts List, they have to submit an application, and then I validate that there is evidence that they work in the nonprofit sector, whether that's from their website or from the App Exchange or from LinkedIn or maybe their Trailblazer profile page. So these are my two sources, the App Exchange and Watts List. Every company that's on Watts List is automatically included in the analysis. But of course, not every company that's on the App Exchange works in the nonprofit or education industries. So how do I decide which companies to include there? So to explain that, I'm going to get a bit into the weeds of the App Exchange. And to do that, I've got a profile here that I'll walk you through. Agile Cloud alphabetically happened to be the first company that fit my criteria for this presentation, so that's why I'm sharing their particular profile. But just want to call out a couple of things that will help you better understand the analysis. So first of all, on an App Exchange profile, you'll see a number here, which is projects completed. So every project that a consulting firm does, they can submit to Salesforce. And in so doing, part of the information that Salesforce collects is what Salesforce products was this project related to, and in what industry was this particular project related to. And so once that project is submitted, in order for it to count here on the App Exchange, the customer that the project was for has to complete a customer satisfaction or CSAT survey. And once that information comes back into Salesforce, then Salesforce will allow that project to count. And part of what happens then with these log projects is evident in this section called Partner Navigator. So there are two sections to Partner Navigator. The first one is called Salesforce Expertise. This corresponds to those specific products that were used as part of the partner's project. And you can see on the profile, there's a section here for education solutions and a section for nonprofit solutions. With each of these statuses, there is a set of tiers, so level 1, level 2, and expert. And then there are functional areas underneath each as well. So that's the product expertise section. And then you've got the industry expertise section. And here you see education, industry, and nonprofit industry, again, with levels as well as with subcategories. So these are the four things that I look for when I'm determining which companies to include in this analysis. They need to have navigator status for at least one of these four areas: education solutions, nonprofit solutions, education industry, or nonprofit industry. Okay, so that's the primary thing to understand in terms of what companies are in the data set. And then there's a couple of other things I want to highlight on the App Exchange profile that also feed into the data that's collected. So you see here the number at the top, certified experts. This is how many people in the company hold Salesforce certifications. And then those specific certifications are displayed here in the certifications box on the profile. If we go into, for example, the consultant certification category, we can see things like how many education cloud consultant certifications do they have, nonprofit cloud consultant, nonprofit success pack consultant, et cetera. These certifications aren't required for me to include the company in the survey, but they are then part of the data that I analyze. And then if we go to the reviews tab, two other things to highlight here. One is this number, the customer satisfaction or CSAT score. So this is the aggregate score of all of the surveys that have been collected for the project submitted. And then you also can see the total number of reviews that have been submitted for the company that are displayed below, either, again, from those surveys, or people can come directly and write reviews of the company. So there's a lot of nuance in terms of how Salesforce handles this information and how partners earn these various levels and so forth that I won't get into for the sake of time today. I have another webinar that's on my YouTube channel about how to use the App Exchange that gets more into some of that detail if you're interested. But otherwise, let's go ahead and get into our next question. And this is how many consulting businesses are aligned to Salesforce in the nonprofit and education markets in 2025? And I'm going to tell you the answer to that question. By my tally, there are 449. And this is as of June 30th, 2025. So my process each year is to collect data during the month of June. And so that's what this information I'm presenting to you, that's the time period is reflective of. And then I update it annually. So 449 businesses total. And then here's how that breaks out. There are 380 of them on the App Exchange. There are 173 on Watts List, which includes both multi-person firms and independents. And then you can see there's 104 businesses that are shared in common between the App Exchange and Watts List. Okay. And then let's go a little bit deeper into this in terms of how they break out between nonprofit and education-focused businesses. So from the App Exchange, 262 total businesses that have status in the nonprofit sector, 134 total that have status in the education sector, again, from those navigator designations, and then 56 have both nonprofit and education. And then again, with Watts List, every company on Watts List works in the nonprofit sector, but then there are additional 78 that also work in the education sector. So how has this changed over time? So the simple answer is the number of partners has been growing. The deeper answer is a little bit more nuanced. So as you look at this chart, the yellow line represents the current year survey. So FY26, we're in Salesforce's fiscal year 2026. So that's what the FY corresponds to. You can see the 449 today versus 425 last year. And then just to point out that there's a little bit of apples and oranges here on this chart, because again, up until FY 2023, I was relying on the Salesforce.org partner network to tell me who these companies were. And there were 128 of them that were in the US and Canada because that was my focus at that point in time. Starting in FY 2024, I broadened it to using the criteria that I just described and include companies now globally and not just in the US and Canada. So that's why there's such a big jump here on this chart. So again, there's growth of the number of partners from last year, but underneath that, there also is this churn. And this is something I've observed really in every year that I've done this. But in this past year, 67 businesses fell out of the data set because they no longer met the criteria. But an additional 91 companies came into the data set because they did meet the criteria. Either they were a new business, or they had newly acquired the necessary status in the App Exchange, or they were newly a part of Watts List. So the net change is 24 companies, which represents about a 5% year-over-year growth of the total partner landscape. How does that compare to the App Exchange overall? So if you look at the first column here, again, as of June 2025, there were 3,744 consulting companies on the App Exchange. And of those, 380 had qualifications for nonprofit or education. So about 1 in 10 companies, if you think of it that way, about 1 in 10 partners on the App Exchange have some status for nonprofit or education. But those nonprofit and education partners have been growing more slowly than the App Exchange as a whole. So over the course of a year, the number of companies on the App Exchange grew by 23%. The number of nonprofit and education partners only grew by 4%. And then looking at 2-year growth, the number of partners on the App Exchange grew by 47% in 2 years. That's 1,200 new companies in the past 2 years on the App Exchange. If you go back to 2019, there were only 1,200 partners total. And that was now just achieved in the past 2 years on the App Exchange. So a lot of growth in partners, but again, for these partners growing more slowly, a 2-year rate of growth of just 12%. And that again, that's net change because partners are coming and going. And then I think this is a fun stat. So of the 380 companies that were in this year's survey, how many have been in the landscape in prior years? So if you go back to the previous year, 319 of the 380 were in the data set last year. And then if you go all the way back to FY 2019, so in June of 2018, um, 29 of the companies that were in the data set then are still in the data set today. So there definitely are some OGs that are still out there. But I mean, look between FY 2024 and now, 189 firms have been added to the data set. So it's the number is basically doubled in terms of new businesses coming in. So to me, this is one of my takeaways that it's a much more kind of fluid and dynamic situation with these partners. It's not like there's just this group of partners that grows a little bit every year, but there's a lot of companies kind of coming into and leaving this landscape over time. Where are these businesses located? As I mentioned, this is a global data set. So 57% of these companies are in the US. That's followed by Western Europe, UK and Ireland, Asia, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and then 2% in Africa, Middle East, and Central and South America, respectively. Um, if you look at how things are changing across these regions, so this is that earlier chart, but now broken out by region. Um, Again, the US saw the most net growth in terms of companies. There's 16 new companies added in the US over last year. But Asia actually saw the most percentage growth, 39% percentage growth in Asia, um, versus just 6% growth in the US. And then I think it's also interesting to see that the US, the UK and Ireland, um, Asia, Canada, these were all Africa, these were all had net positive growth over the past 2 years. But Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Central and South America had a net 2 year contraction. So the growth is not evenly distributed geographically. And then as we look in terms of for each of these regions, how many partners were the same from last year versus new this year? So in the US, 39 firms came into the data set, 219 remained. In Asia, 12 firms came into the data set. So 60% of the companies in the data set this year were new, and all 12 of those companies were based in India. In fact, I think 27 out of the 32 companies in the Asia region are in India. The largest concentration, again, of companies is in the US. So here you can see how partners are distributed between the US states and Canadian provinces. California, maybe no surprise, has the most companies at 42, and that's up from 37 last year. So they're continuing to add partners there. Okay, the next two data points are drawn from LinkedIn. So for each company that qualifies between Watts List and the App Exchange, I go to LinkedIn to answer the questions that follow. So how long have these companies been in business? A business's longevity can tell you a little bit something about their maturity and how established they are. And here, this is a pretty good bell curve, I would say. The median years in business across all these companies is 10. I'm going to use the median a lot as we go through. That just means the middle. So half of the companies have been in business longer than 10 years. Half of the companies have been in business less than 10 years. So like in this example, you can see 7 of the companies are fairly new. They've only been around a year or so, and 6 of the companies have been around over 50 years. Salesforce itself was founded, just 25 years ago. So clearly companies that are older than 25 years have been were doing something else before they started doing Salesforce. How do these businesses vary by number of employees? Um, so again, this is LinkedIn data. This is my proxy for actual employee data. I find that it's generally pretty good because companies on Watts List can self-report employment data, and it's generally right around whatever is showing up on LinkedIn. But do keep in mind these are not companies officially reporting their employment data to me. Um, so as I look at this, I see that a little more than one quarter of the companies have 10 or few employees, while another 25% or so have more than 100. So it's really that range between 10 and 100 employees where most of these companies sit today, with the median number being 29. Um, and I know, the state of the economy has been on everybody's mind and the job market. And so, how have these companies been affected? So, this year, of the firms that were in the survey for both years, 49% of them grew. So 49% of the companies added headcount from last year to this year. And that's about where it was the previous year as well. So that 49% of growth has held over this year and last year. What is a little different is that the number of companies that have shrunk went up. So this year, 34% of the companies lost headcount versus 31% in the prior year and 25% in the year before that. So I think one of the takeaways here is that slightly more firms were flat or shrunk in this landscape than grew compared to the prior 2 years. For those companies that grew, the median amount of growth was 13% in headcount, which is about the same as it was last year. And then for those companies that lost employees, the median loss was about 11% of their employees. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the App Exchange. These next set of data points are coming from there. And again, remember, for companies to be included, it's based on their having status across those navigator categories or being part of Watt's list. So as we look across these companies, how do they vary in terms of the number of Salesforce consultants that they have? And again, this is looking by bands of consultants. So companies that have 1 to 2 consultants versus 3 to 10 versus 11 to 25, and then how those bands have changed year over year. I'll just draw your attention to the numbers here at the bottom. So again, about a quarter of the firms have 10 or fewer consultants. 16% have over 1,000 consultants. Over 100 consultants. And then the middle there between 10 and 100 is where most of these companies sit. So makes sense that most of these companies do consulting as their primary business. So their employee numbers kind of tend to correspond to their number of consultants, with the median here being 28 consultants. One thing I found interesting looking at this was that if you look at the App Exchange as a whole, so those 3,700 partners, 59% of those companies have 10 or fewer consultants, versus with this set of companies, it's 28%. So 28% with 10 or fewer versus 59% with 10 or fewer. So in general, the companies that serve these two sectors tend to be larger companies than those partners on the App Exchange as a whole. And then how has that changed year over year? So in this chart, you can see that 50% of businesses in the landscape between this year and last year grew their number of consultants. So again, sort of along the same lines as that 49% employee growth, 49% of companies growing headcount, 50% of companies grew their consultant or certified expert count, 32% lost consultants, and then 16% were flat. For those that grew, the median percentage of change was 20%. And for those that shrank, the median percentage loss was 13%. How many Salesforce projects have these businesses completed? So the median here, again, these are broken out into bands and year over year. The median number here was 70, which is in that 51 to 100 project band. So again, if you are a company that does this work, this gives you some sense of what company you're keeping in terms of the projects you've completed. If you're a nonprofit or education institution looking for a partner, this gives you some sense of what's typical in terms of projects completed. Some companies have completed over 1,000 projects. There are just a few of those, but they do exist. And then, certainly there are plenty of companies that have completed 10 or fewer projects as well. What customer satisfaction ratings have these businesses earned? So almost all of them have high CSAT scores. In fact, it's not unusual for a company score to be high. It's unusual for it to be low. And I know a lot of companies like to trade on the fact that their score is high, but that alone doesn't really separate these companies one from another that much. I mean, in fact, just look at in 2 years, the number of companies that achieve perfect five-star ratings basically doubled. So more and more companies are hitting that five-star benchmark, with the median across all companies of being 4.9. And there are, I think, something like 40, there are over 40 companies that have had that 5.0 rating for 3 years in a row. How many customer reviews do these businesses have? So we looked at that example on the App Exchange profile. Again, the median here is around 28. Some companies have far less, some companies have far more. Um, and these things tend to correlate. Things like project size, number of reviews, number of consultants, obviously, tend to correlate to the size clients that businesses like to work with. So the bigger firms tend to have more projects, more consultants, more reviews. The smaller companies have smaller numbers in all those categories. And that's okay because this ecosystem needs companies that can be aligned to all segments. So as I look across these charts and where these bands fall, to me, this represents health of the ecosystem because things are distributed in the way that they are, not bunched up at sort of one end or the other. How many Salesforce certifications are represented by these businesses? You can see these do tend to cluster a little bit more towards the top of the chart than the bottom. The median number of certifications across all these firms is 123. That's up from 111 last year. Certifications like projects it's cumulative, so it can go up steadily over time. And then I also like to look at this number, which is the average certs per consultant. So for all the consultants in a company or all the consultants in the data set, what's the average number of certifications they hold? And this year that was 4.5. And then how has this changed over year? So year over year, so 77% of businesses increased their certification count, 13% decreased, and 10% were flat. Those that increased, the median rate of increase was 29%, so jumping at a pretty good clip. And those that lost, the median decrease was 15% of certifications. And then which certifications are represented by these businesses? So certifications again are a proxy for Salesforce knowledge and skills. And so, which certifications a firm holds, the number of certifications a firm holds, this can tell you something about their ability to take on certain types of Salesforce work. So this chart lays out things in a comparative fashion. I'll just walk through a couple of examples here to give you the orientation. So if you look across all the companies, all 499 companies, and look at the NPSP certification, this up until a month or two ago, this was the nonprofit cloud certification. It's now called the NPSP certification. So 1,252 of those certifications exist across those 499 companies, or sorry, 449 companies. 68% of companies hold at least one. The median across all companies is two, so there aren't necessarily large numbers of these certifications inside of companies, but some companies have a lot. And in fact, the firm that has the most has 59 of them. So that kind of gives you what the outer band is of companies having that certification. And then the median percentage of all consultants is 12. So you know half of companies have more than 12% of their consultants with this certification. Half of the companies have less than this number. So that's for the NPSP certification. Again, the new nonprofit cloud certification is new as of this year. So far, there are only 176 of those certifications in the wild among these firms. 14% of firms have these, so that's maybe like what, about 1 in 8 today. Same median in terms of count. The most any company has of that certification right now is 20. And for those companies that have it, the median number of consultants that have the certification is 7%. Um, so I just want to point out a couple of other things here on this chart. If we look at Marketing Cloud and Pardot certifications, for whatever reason, this has been declining. 2 years ago, the percentage of companies having Marketing Cloud certifications was 46%, and the percentage of companies having Pardot certifications was 54%. Now, again, companies come and go out of the survey, so that doesn't necessarily mean that they're dropping within the companies that have them, but it just means that the companies in this data set are less well qualified or less well certified, rather, on those two products than previously. Architect and developer, these are not individual certs, but these are categories of certs. That's why those numbers are so high. There are multiple types of architect certifications and developer certifications. So most firms have those, and at very high rates. So this is slide one of two, and then slide two of two. Like this is where the action really is. So notice how fast these three certs have permeated into these companies. So the Data Cloud cert just came out 2 years ago. Already, there are 5,000 of them across these companies, and 70% of the companies have at least one Data Cloud cert. But look at AI Associate. This is more companies have the AI associate certification now than any other single certification, and at higher percentages. I mean, this is the kind of the biggest number on the chart. So it really shows you, one, the interest that companies have had in and consultants have had in getting the certification. But it's also worth mentioning that Salesforce made these certifications free for a period of time, which may explain the rapid amount of uptake of them. Okay, and then let's get into the specific navigator credentials. And again, this is across two different categories, the Salesforce or product expertise for both nonprofit and education clouds, and then the industry expertise for nonprofit and education industry. So at the point the survey was taken in June, 169 companies had the nonprofit solution expertise. So that's about 45% of all the companies in the survey. And you can kind of see how those numbers have been trending year over year. This number is a little bit lower than last year. There were 188 companies in the survey last year who had this nonprofit solution expertise, so that's dropped a little bit. I like to look at this folks achieving that expert level. That's only 31 companies across the whole App Exchange, so that's like 1% of all Salesforce partners have achieved expert status for nonprofit solutions, which is pretty impressive. And then remember, there were those subcategories underneath nonprofit solutions. What I would just highlight here, by the way, these are not all on the same scale, but you can see in each case, in each category, the number of companies achieving in that category are down a little bit um, across fundraising, program management, engagement. Grant making is the one exception, and you can really see how many more firms have been logging projects in the area of grant making over the past couple of years. That's had a lot of growth. And then when you look at how many companies have either one, two, three, or all four of those categories, most do not have all four, but more have four than any other category or any other number. So I think, to me, that's indicative of the fact that companies that work in this space tend to be pretty well-rounded in their ability to serve nonprofits across these various kind of product or functional areas. So we go from nonprofit solution down to nonprofit industry. There are more companies here. It's easier to have navigator status at an industry level as opposed to a solution level or product level. And we can see that here that 236 firms have achieved that this year. That's 63% of the companies in the survey. And again, those achieving expert now only down to 8 companies. So a very tiny number of those folks. And then by contrast, companies achieving the education solution expertise, many fewer companies, only 39 total companies on the App Exchange have any status for education solutions, which is just 10% of the firms in the survey. Um, that's been relatively steady over the past 3 years, but far fewer companies have any achievement there. Similarly, under education solutions, we've got four categories: recruiting, student success, advancement, marketing, and communications. As with nonprofit, actually in this case, everybody dropped a little bit. Every category dropped a little bit from last year. Fewer companies in each of these areas. Um, and advancement, interestingly, is the one that has the fewest companies that have status, only 21 companies. And then again, how many of the companies that have this education solution status, how many of them have status for one, two, three, or four of those subspecialties? Almost identical to nonprofit, 43% of them have all four. So again, pointing to companies being relatively well-rounded across those solution areas. And then finally, education industry expertise. So more companies here, 130 have status in the education industry, and that's 35% of the companies in the survey. All right, coming to the home stretch here, want to talk about some of the stats from Watt's List. I intend Watt's List to really fill in some of the gaps around the information that can be collected on the App Exchange. And so one of the questions here related to Watt's List profiles is what industries do the businesses work with or work in? So no surprise, they pretty much all work in the nonprofit industry. The second most prevalent industry is education, followed by technology. On average, companies on Watt's List work across about 3 different industries. But when you look at how much of the work of these companies is in the nonprofit sector, there's 66 companies on Watt's List who do 100% of their businesses with nonprofits. And when you add in the 50 that do 75% or more of their business, well over 2/3 of the companies on Watt's List are doing the majority of their business in the nonprofit sector. But not everybody. How many years of Salesforce experience in the nonprofit sector do these businesses have? So, we can learn from other sources how long companies have been around. But as far as I know, Watt's List is unique in asking companies specifically how many years have they been doing Salesforce work in the nonprofit sector. And the median there is 11. So, a good number of these companies have been doing this work for a while. Some are brand new. Some have been doing it for 15 years or more. But this is up from, I think even the median was 9 last year. So I think 85% of these companies have been doing Salesforce work at least for 5 years in the nonprofit sector. What size organizations do these businesses serve? So again, it's great if a business is well qualified relative to Salesforce, but then it's also important to understand which segments of the market do they serve, right? Because small organizations and large organizations need Salesforce consultant help. So here, companies could choose multiple options, so there's not really a median here per se. But again, this kind of 26 to 75 employee band tends to be the most well-served among the companies on Watt's List. Twice as many serve that band as serve the 500 plus employee band. Which nonprofit subverticals do these businesses focus on? So again, that a company works with nonprofits is great. Even better to know, well, which types of nonprofits do they work with in terms of a vertical? And so you can see how that stacks up here. Companies who are on Watt's List can choose up to 5 of these as they create their profile, or they can write in their own if these categories don't apply. The median number here is 5 in terms of how many subverticals a given businesses support. And you can see education, youth, human services, and foundations are the top 3 as of this year in terms of subverticals served by these companies. And then which Salesforce nonprofit solutions do these businesses support? So probably no surprise that NPSP leads the pack here, followed by PMM, The new nonprofit cloud is coming in third now with 116 companies saying that they support the new nonprofit cloud. That's up from 100 last year, so that is growing. The new nonprofit cloud solution for grant making is up from 71 to 83, so that's also growing. Which other Salesforce solutions do these businesses support? So besides the nonprofit specific solutions, again, maybe no surprise, Sales Cloud leads the pack. It's the granddaddy of all the clouds. But interestingly, Experience Cloud comes in second. A lot of nonprofit projects require portals or communities, so it's great to see how well represented that cloud is among the consultants on Watt's list. You can see Marketing Cloud and Account Engagement or Pardot and Marketing Cloud itself are pretty close here. Data Cloud, again, maybe not surprisingly, was the biggest, had the most growth, the biggest jump. It's grown 322% in just the past 2 years. And also B2C commerce, B2C commerce here had another big jump from 9 companies to 17. And then Agentforce is in here as well. So 34 companies right now identify that they can support Agentforce projects. And then what technologies beyond Salesforce do these businesses support? So obviously nonprofits use more technology solutions than just Salesforce, and a number of these businesses can support nonprofits with those technologies as well. The thing I would just highlight here is HubSpot. Again, that's the biggest grower on this chart. In the past 2 years, that's gone from 23 companies to 44, so it's almost doubled in 2 years. So for whatever reason, HubSpot is getting more traction and more attention from the companies that are on Watt's list. Which third-party apps do these businesses support? So we all know Salesforce solutions are typically a function of both Salesforce technology and third-party apps. You can see how the top 20, at least, there are over 100 different ISV apps that the partners on Watt's list have said they work with. The median apps per business is 15. So half of the companies on Watt's list work with 15 or more apps, half work with 15 or less. And then looking at that from the other end of the telescope, there's a median of 16 businesses per app. So half of the apps have 16 or more companies aligned, half have 16 or less. And Form Assembly, MailChimp, and DocuSign lead the pack here. And then the last pieces of data here are related to hiring. A few weeks ago, I released a jobs report. So this is just recapping three of the charts from that report. So from September 24th to August 2025, there were 374 total consulting jobs posted across 50 different businesses that are part of Watt's list. And the most common type of job was sales and marketing. Although that's about 20% of the jobs. If you add up these other more traditional technical roles, consultant, developer, PM, architect, et cetera, those were the bulk of the jobs were those technical roles. About 60% of the total jobs were in those technical roles. This is how job postings varied by month. It does appear that things tended to kind of trend downward for the first 2/3 of the year and then tick back up. This is the first year I've collected this data, so hard to say if this represents any kind of particular trend. Although I will tell you that so far this year, for the first 3 months of this year, so September, October, November, hiring is a little behind where it was last year. Or rather, the job postings are a little behind. So there's a 128 for that 3-month period last year versus 113 this year. So not wildly off, but down just slightly. And then when you look at which companies are hiring based on the size of the company, about a third of the new jobs were in businesses with 100 or fewer employees. A third of them were in this green wedge, which is 101 to 250 employees. And then a third were in this a range of 251 to over 1,000 employee companies. So probably stands to reason the bigger companies are doing more hiring. Okay, Got a couple of summary points I'd like to make. So just to recap some of the highlights for me. So the total number of consulting partners aligned to nonprofit and education continues to grow year over year, though at a rate slower than partner growth overall. The US is the home to the most partners and added the most new companies last year, but the region with the fastest percentage growth was India. Consultant-wise, companies aligned to these sectors are generally larger than Salesforce partners overall. On the App Exchange, nearly twice as many companies are aligned to nonprofit as to education. Employee-wise, slightly more companies were flat or shrank last year than grew, so 51% versus 49%. Data Cloud, AI Associate, and AI Specialist were the fastest growing certifications among these businesses. Only 14% currently hold the new nonprofit cloud cert compared to 68% for the NPSP cert. Companies supporting the new nonprofit cloud on Watt's list lag behind companies supporting NPSP but are growing. And now 1 in 5 companies are supporting Agentforce. And sales and marketing were the most common types of jobs last year. So I know we've had a lot of questions come in, so I'm looking forward to diving into that. Want to just leave you with a couple of offers. So if you'd like to go deeper with this information for nonprofits, one of my primary offers is partner selections, and there's 3 flavors of that. So the first is a partner research consultation. So this is where I'll meet with you for 30 minutes, talk about what your needs are related to a partner, either for a new implementation or a partner to support an existing Salesforce deployment. Based on your needs, I'll go back into this data set and we'll do customized research. And then come back on another 30-minute call to review the findings and discuss with you. If you're looking for something a little more substantive than that, then I've got 2 options for assisting you more broadly with partner selection. The first is an advisory engagement. And so this is where I would work alongside you as you identify, evaluate, hire, engage your partner. I can join you wherever you are in the process, and we can do that in as little as a 1 month increment. Again, just to try to help you have greater clarity and confidence about your choice of partner. And then if you'd like me to run the whole thing for you, then that's where the partner selection complete project comes in. So this is where I would basically do the process for you, create the RFI, distribute it, and kind of run the timeline to get it through to completion for you. So if you're interested in any of these services, please feel free to reach out. If you're a consulting business in this space, I'm offering a comparative analysis. So this is a fairly turnkey offer where you will let me know what are 10 businesses that you would like to be compared to in this data set. And then I will go and do that analysis for you. It'll be a slide deck of almost 200 slides looking at not only kind of current state, but also 1 and 3 year and 5 year growth trends in each of these areas. There also is this lookalike option where I'll, based on the data, will tell you what other companies sort of look like you based on these various metrics. And then if you have certain growth goals, if you're looking to get to a certain number of consultants or projects or certifications, we can look back in time at the companies that have gotten there and see sort of what trajectory they were on to get there. So there's more information about that on my website. And then finally, for everybody, just can't miss the opportunity to talk about change killers, regardless of sort of where you are, inside of a nonprofit, in consulting with a software company, and confronting technology transitions. It's disruptive to undertake this, and this disruption can trigger resistance, and that resistance can cause your project to slow down or stall out or even tank. And author Jan Catterley, who I'm partnered with, she calls these the change killers and offers a framework for how to manage the resistance that comes up through disruptive change and do it both in a way that's grounded in research and evidence, as well as a way that's very human-centered. And so Jan and I are going to be doing a whole slate of workshops for both nonprofit leaders and consultants in 2026. We'll have some intro workshops. We'll have some advanced workshops for people who want to go deeper, and then private workshops for consulting teams and companies and organizations. And so would invite you to check that out as well. So I'll leave these QR codes and links on the screen if you want to get into any of those additional offers. Top three things you look for when recommending partners to your customers. I actually have a slide on that. Uh, oh, you teed me up so nicely for this. These are my big questions when I'm helping nonprofits with partners. So, or questions for them to answer. So, have we identified a partner that provides the services we need for the solutions we need and for organizations like us, right? So again, 449 companies out there that could help you, but which of them offer the services that you need, um, have this support the solutions that you're going to need, and do it for organizations like you based on your size, your subvertical, your budget, all of those kind of things. So first, making sure you're fishing in the right pond. The second is being able to answer, does the partner truly understand our needs and what we're looking for, and how do we know? So this really gets to the nonprofit effectively communicating what it is they're trying to accomplish, not only sort of user at a user story level, but at a strategic level, and then making sure that the partners that they're sharing this information with are communicating back to them a level of understanding of this. The third is that has the partner clearly presented a solution or approach that we believe will meet our needs on our budget and timeline. So this is then making sure that what you've heard back from the partner addresses your needs and can do it in the way that you need it to be done. Fourth is, has the partner presented evidence that these are problems that they have solved successfully before? So it's one thing to say, yeah, we can do it. It's another thing to say, and we've also done it, and you can talk to the people we've done it for. And then finally, and this is my own kind of soapbox that I get on, but all the prior experience that a company has with Salesforce in a subvertical with certain solutions doesn't really matter that much to a given client unless the people on their project can bring all that to bear. And whether the specific individuals on your project have that experience, or at the very least, they can get access to it from within the company. That's really ultimately what's going to determine the success or failure of your project is the people that are working with you on it. So those are the five big questions that I encourage nonprofits to ask, and that when I'm working with them, that we're going to be focused on getting answers to. All right. I think that's it. Thank you all for hanging in. Again, really appreciate your questions and your interest in this topic. If I can be of any help to you in your own diligence and decisions around Salesforce and this ecosystem, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And thank you all. Enjoy the rest of the day.